Khayyam's work on the new Jalali calendar, named after Jalaluddin Malik Shah, made him the most respected astronomer at the royal court. In the West, he is famous for his rubaiyat, 4-line poems which Edward Fitzgerald translated and published.
These books lay in the bookseller's shop. Nobody bought a single one. They cost a certain amount. He reduced them to 1 shilling, small amount. Nobody bought them. He reduced them to 1 penny, the smallest coin of the realm. And he put them in a box outside his shop, and nobody bought them. Now, I am certainly surprised that nobody had enough perception to read these poems and see how good they were. But since everyone else had failed to notice that, I'm astonished that one man did. A man called Whitley Stokes, who was an editor, stopped outside the shop, looked through this penny box, took out a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, read it, and said, "My stars, this is good poetry. This is good poetry." And he walked into the shop, bought some more copies, sent them to his friends, and that was the rocket went up.
Fitzgerald's rubaiyat became a publishing sensation and entered the bloodstream of popular culture. Omar Khayyam dining clubs sprang up dedicated to Fitzgerald's rubaiyat. The London Club is still going strong, and I met 2 of its members to find out why. Thank you very much for inviting me to this club. And I'm so pleased to be here really today, because as a Persian, as a great admirer of Omar Khayyam, I am so happy to see 2 members of the Omar Khayyam Club still celebrating his life after 900 years. I mean, what is the interest in Omar Khayyam and Fitzgerald?
Well, it was very fashionable to have dining clubs dedicated to, and there was authors. It was a Pepys Club, which still, I believe, exists. There was one devoted to Thackeray, and one devoted to Dickens, and so on and so forth.
The dinners, with the wonderful menus that we still produce, are a wonderful vehicle for us to have an evening of fun, but one that actually looks back seriously at both Omar Khayyam and Fitzgerald.
And when was the club first founded?
Well, in the early 1890s. The first formal dinner of the club was in 1893.
Could you tell me what usually happened at your dinners?
We meet twice a year, so we have a spring dinner and an autumn dinner. We stick with the same format that we've always had. So we have a wonderful menu, and a cartoonist will have been asked by the secretary, which happens to be me, to make a drawing.
What sort of food do you eat at these dinners?
I suppose that's the biggest difference. If you look at some of the menus of the early
How old is
menus,
that
well,
menu
this
in
is
your hand?
1901, so this is a 7-course menu: hors d'oeuvre, consommé, salmon, lamb, on and on. It's certainly much grander than the menu that we would have now.
Roger, do you allow women to become members
I'm
of the
afraid
club?
not.
Why not? Omar Khayyam
we do-
wouldn't be happy to hear that.
I think it is a great pity, yes, exactly.
What sort of people were attracted to the club?
Well, practically every writer of any note, basically. Conan Doyle, Henry James, Thomas Hardy, A. Houseman, J.M. Barrie. You know, it's just a roll call of all the leading writers of the time, basically.
And they would gather to discuss literature and poetry and Omar Khayyam, Fitzgerald, and have fun.
Yeah, very much have fun, I think.
America too had an Omar Khayyam club. The Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas in Austin holds one of the largest collections of rubaiyat materials in the world.
Here we have the Omar Khayyam Club of America. The Americans had to have their Omar Khayyam Club, just like the British, so a few years later they founded one. And these are some of the souvenir menus. As you can see, they're celebrating this sort of vaguely Eastern aesthetic that they've assigned to the rubaiyat. And at the back of each menu are signed the names of those in attendance at the meal, and all done up to make them all feel very special about their connection to Omar. This is the first edition of Edward Fitzgerald's translation of the Rubaiyat, and it is one of the great rarities of 19th century British poetry.
Right.
Fitzgerald had to pay to have it published by Bernard Quaritch, and he didn't even put his name on the cover. And as you can see, it's a small, not particularly impressive volume. The Rubaiyat spawned all sorts of products.
Right.
Some of which have absolutely no relationship to the poet.
Yes.
For example, Omar tooth powder, which you could buy in England. I don't really get what the connection is. You could also buy the game of the Rubaiyat, which is just a standard set of playing cards, each suit represented by a different translator. And this is a wonderful program from a performance of the biographical play Omar the Tent Maker.
It was called the tent maker because Khayyam in Persian means the tent maker.
Exactly. So he was commonly known in the popular culture as Omar the Tent Maker.
It is interesting that usually it is referred to him as Omar by his first name in America.
Yes, I think it's quite significant.
Yes.
There's a kind of familiarity
Yes.
with this 11th century poet that,
Right.
that is surprising looking
Yes.
back at it now. I think there was a sense that this poet was speaking directly to you.
The ball no question makes of eyes and nose, but right or left as strikes the player goes. And he that tossed thee down into the field, he knows about it all. He knows. He knows.
Janet Davis is Professor of American Studies.
Omar Khayyam in the United States was a sensation and was very much part and parcel in a way to the cultural changes, the explosive array of changes occurring in the United States in the late 19th century and early 20th century.
And how was it that Omar Khayyam entered into the popular culture then?
Americans seized upon the kind of the impulses of live for the moment, the emphasis upon material pleasure, and an emphasis on fate and a world that is uncertain. And interestingly, a text that starts out as a kind of high cultural product becomes quickly massified.
This is one of my other favorite items. This little copy was purchased in Cairo
Yeah, I can see Cairo.
by a soldier in the British Army during World War I in 1917. And he has gone through this copy, which he could have fit in his rucksack, and he's underlined all the passages about the inevitability of death. And it reminds you how important the philosophy of the Rubaiyat was to its readers at the time. It's a very important window through which to view World War I.
In some ways, it has become indivisible from a broader American way of life and thinking. But there is a tendency to forget history in the ways in which contemporary geopolitical problems have overshadowed our cultural memory of a Persian astronomer, poet, and mathematician who was the product of an incredibly cosmopolitan medieval Persian world that Americans today, in a kind of polarity of Islam and Christianity as an inevitable clash, have simply forgotten.